Richard Donovan had always been a patient man. 23 years as a high school math teacher had cultivated in him a certain tolerance for nonsense. He could withstand the persistent tapping of pencils during exams, the thinly veiled excuses for late homework, and even the occasional spitball that missed its intended target. But on that crisp October morning, as he stood in his bathrobe staring at the twin tire tracks cutting across his meticulously maintained front lawn, something inside him snapped like a dry twig. The muddy indentations stretched from the edge of his property near the mailbox, curved in a lazy arc, and disappeared onto the street on the other side of his corner lot. Richard's hands trembled slightly as he bent down to examine the damage. The Kentucky bluegrass he had nurtured for 7 years, fertilized, aerated, and watered with religious devotion, lay flattened and dying in parallel lines of destruction. Who would do this? He whispered to himself, the steam from his coffee cup dancing in the morning air. His neighbor Walter appeared at the fence line, his white hair uncombed and standing up like an electrified halo. Happened just after midnight, he called over. Minivan. Navy blue or black, couldn't tell in the dark. Woman driver. Young, I think. Richard straightened up, his knees protesting the movement. You saw it happen? Insomnia, Walter shrugged. Been watching the street since 3 this morning. Not the first time she's done it, either. Richard turned back to survey the damage, a slow burn of anger building in his chest. His lawn was his sanctuary, the place where the order world of mathematics manifested in neat, even rows of grass. Each blade represented the careful balance of variables: water, sunlight, soil, pH, all choreographed into a green symphony that cushioned his bare feet in summer and greeted him with dewy sparkles each morning. I'll have to recede, he muttered, calculating the cost and labor in his head. Good luck with that, Walter snorted. She'll just drive over it again. Happens every couple of weeks. Takes the shortcut from Maple to Elmwood. GPS probably told her it was quicker. Richard felt a muscle twitch below his left eye. Every couple of weeks, and nobody's done anything. Called the police once. They said without proof it's just vandalism. Low priority. Walter spat onto his own immaculate lawn. Welcome to modern times, Rich. People don't respect property anymore. Inside his house, Richard's morning routine derailed completely. He forgot to grade the algebra quizzes. He left his lunch sitting on the counter. His mind kept returning to those tire tracks, to the casual disregard for boundaries they represented. For 23 years, he had taught teenagers about respect, about actions and consequences. He prided himself on being reasonable, on finding the logical solution to any problem. But there was nothing logical about someone deciding his lawn was a convenient shortcut. That evening, Richard sat at his kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, a ruler, and 3 sharpened pencils. He sketched his property from above, marking the path of the tires with precise red lines. He consulted topographical maps of the neighborhood online. He researched local ordinances regarding property modifications, and slowly, methodically, a plan began to take shape. If it's a shortcut she wants, he murmured to himself as the kitchen clock ticked past midnight, then I'll give her something to remember. The next morning, Richard called in sick to school for the first time in 7 years. He had measurements to take, supplies to gather, and a lesson in consequences to design. As he stood on his lawn with a measuring tape, he caught Walter watching him over the fence. Planning something? The old man asked, a hint of amusement in his rheumy eyes. Richard smiled thinly. Just a little landscape project. About time, Walter nodded. I'll get my popcorn ready. Richard Donovan had never been a vindictive man, but as he stood in the home improvement store that Tuesday afternoon, scanning the aisles with newfound purpose, he couldn't deny the satisfaction bubbling up inside him. His shopping cart already contained 2 shovels, one with a pointed tip for breaking ground and another with a flat edge for shaping, along with heavy-duty gardening gloves and a bright orange surveyor's string. Can I help you find anything, sir? Asked a young employee whose name read Devon. Richard hesitated, then leaned in slightly. I'm planning a water feature for my front yard. Something substantial. Devon's face lit up. We just got in these solar-powered pumps that would be perfect for a fountain or small pond. Very eco-friendly. I'm thinking bigger, Richard replied, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. More like a moat. A moat? Like around a castle? Devon's eyebrows shot up, curiosity replacing his retail smile. Exactly like that. Richard pulled out his legal pad, unfolding a carefully drawn diagram. It'll follow the perimeter of my corner lot, approximately 2 feet wide and 18 inches deep. I calculated that I'll need about 4 cubic yards of soil displacement. Devon studied the plans with growing interest. This isn't your average weekend project, Mr. Donovan, Richard Donovan. And no, it's not. He tapped the paper with one finger. I'm on fall break from teaching. I have exactly 9 days to complete this. By the time Richard left the store, his sedan was loaded with supplies, and Devin had promised to help deliver the prefabricated concrete lining sections on Thursday. The young man had even suggested several improvements to the original design, including a subtle slope to aid water drainage and special UV-resistant sealant for the concrete joints. At home, Richard changed into his oldest jeans and a faded Carnegie Mellon sweatshirt from his graduate school days. He marked out the planned trench with surveyor's string and wooden stakes, creating a geometric outline that ran 3 feet inside his property line. Standing back to assess the layout, he felt a flutter of doubt. Was this an overreaction? Was he becoming the neighborhood eccentric? The sound of tires squealing around the corner silenced his doubts. A navy blue minivan appeared, slowing as it approached the stop sign nearest Richard's property. The driver, a woman with blonde hair, pulled into a messy ponytail, glanced at her phone, then at the road ahead, clearly calculating. Richard held his breath as the van paused at the stop sign, its turn signal blinking toward the longer route around the block. Then, with a decisive jerk of the steering wheel, the woman drove straight across the stop sign, bounced over the curb, and cut directly across Richard's yard, right through his carefully placed stakes and string. Mud splattered as the tires tore through the grass, leaving fresh tracks that crisscrossed the old ones. "Hey!" Richard shouted, waving his arms frantically. "Stop! This is private property." The woman glanced at him through her window, and Richard couldn't have sworn he saw her smirk before accelerating across the remainder of his lawn and onto Elmwood Avenue. "Could you get her license plate?" Walter called from his porch, where he had been watching the whole scene unfold. Richard realized he had been too shocked to note the number. "No," he admitted, staring at the destroyed survey markers. "But I got a good look at her face." Walter shuffled down his porch steps, hands stuffed in the pockets of his cardigan. "Told you it would happen again. That's Melissa Hargrove. Lives in that new development off Maple. Too important to drive the long way around like the rest of us mortals." "You know her name?" Richard asked, surprised. "Small town," Walter shrugged. "Her husband's on the city council. Works for some tech company, always traveling. She's always in a rush, piano lessons, soccer practice, whatever it is people with kids do these days." He nudged one of the fallen stakes with his slipper. "So, Moat? Huh. Overheard you on the phone earlier." Richard felt his cheeks warm. "It's a decorative water feature." "Sure it is." Walter chuckled, a dry sound like autumn leaves skittering across pavement. "Just make sure it's up to code. City's picky about these things." That night, Richard could barely sleep. He lay awake recalculating dimensions, mentally adjusting his plans. The moat would need to be deeper than originally designed, at least 24 inches. The bridge he planned as a decorative element now became a strategic necessity, the only access point across his watery boundary. It would be removable, of course, something he could lift away when he wasn't home. By morning, Richard had revised his sketches and made 3 important phone calls. 1. By Friday afternoon, Richard Donovan's front yard resembled an archaeological excavation. A neat trench, perfectly uniform in width and depth, curved along the property line from one side of the corner lot to the other. Piles of displaced soil formed small mountains on his lawn, and the concrete liner sections Devin had delivered sat in organized rows, waiting for installation. Richard worked methodically, his movements economical and precise. Years of writing equations on chalkboards had given him strong shoulders and forearms, but this was different labor altogether. His back ached, his hands were blistered despite the gloves, and his fair skin had reddened under the autumn sun. Still, he persisted with the determination of a man on a mission. "Looking good, Mr. D," Devin called, parking his truck at the curb after his shift at the home improvement store. The young man had taken to stopping by each evening to check on the progress, offering advice, and occasionally jumping in to help. "You're making better time than I expected." Richard straightened up, pressing his hands against his lower back. "Mathematics is all about efficiency," he replied, attempting to sound casual despite his exhaustion. "The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, or in this case, a carefully calculated curve." Devin hopped down into the trench, examining the smooth walls. "This is textbook perfect. You sure you've never done landscaping before?" "Just theoretical landscaping," Richard smiled, his first genuine smile in days. "I spent 17 years imagining what I'd do with this yard if I had unlimited time and resources." "Well, it shows." Devin gestured toward the concrete sections. "Ready to start laying the liner?" "I've got a couple hours before I need to head to my night class." They worked together until dusk, fitting the heavy preformed sections into place with mathematical precision. As they finished the northern curve, Richard noticed a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. Neighbors from down the street, a few of his students, and Walter, who sat in a lawn chair with a thermos of what Richard suspected wasn't just coffee. "It's becoming a regular tourist attraction," Devin observed, wiping sweat from his brow. "Everyone's wondering what you're up to." Richard felt a twinge of self-consciousness. In all his years in the neighborhood, he had been the quiet math teacher who kept to himself. Now he was the man building a moat around his front yard. "Just a water feature," he called to the onlookers with a half-hearted wave. "Water feature my foot," Walter cackled loudly. "It's a moat, folks. A genuine castle-protecting moat. Old Rich here is tired of people driving across his lawn." A ripple of understanding moved through the small crowd, followed by murmurs of approval. Richard was surprised to hear several neighbors sharing their own stories of lawn infractions, property line disputes, and neighborhood annoyances. "Someone keeps letting their dog do its business on my rose bushes," complained Mrs. Finkelstein from 2 houses down. "The college kids next door throw beer cans in my recycling bin every weekend," added Mr. Garcia from across the street. "My motion sensor lights get triggered at 3 a.m. by raccoons," contributed another neighbor. Richard realized with a start that his private battle had struck a chord. In this suburban landscape of carefully maintained properties and unspoken rules, his moat had become a symbol of resistance against daily injustices. As darkness fell, most of the onlookers dispersed, but Walter remained, shuffling over to where Richard and Devin were cleaning up their tools. "Hargrove's been asking questions," the old man said without preamble. Richard paused. "Melissa Hargrove? The minivan driver?" "Her husband, actually. Councilman Hargrove." Walter took a sip from his thermos. "Ran into him at the diner this morning. He wanted to know if I'd seen any unusual construction on your property." "What did you tell him?" Richard asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Told him you were putting in a koi pond. Very trendy." Walter winked, but he didn't seem convinced. Mentioned something about setback requirements and runoff regulations. Devin looked concerned. "You did get permits, right, Mr. D?" "Of course," Richard nodded. "Everything's by the book. 3 feet inside my property line, proper drainage plans filed with the city, no utility lines disturbed. I'm a math teacher. I do my homework." "Good," Walter said gravely, "yet I think you've got yourself a powerful enemy now." After Devin left and Walter shuffled back to his own house, Richard sat alone on his porch steps, surveying his work. In the dim glow of the newly installed landscape lights, the moat looked almost magical, a dark ribbon curving through his property, waiting for water. It was beautiful, in its way, exactly as he had envisioned it. Sunday dawned clear and crisp, perfect weather for filling a moat. Richard had been up since first light, making final adjustments to the pump system and checking the integrity of every concrete seam. The bridge, a simple but elegant wooden structure with iron railings, lay ready to install, its stained cedar planks gleaming in the morning sun. "Big day," Walter remarked, appearing at the fence with 2 steaming mugs. He extended one toward Richard. "Thought you might need this. It's the good stuff. Costa Rican dark roast with a splash of bourbon." Richard accepted the mug gratefully. "Isn't it a bit early for bourbon?" "It's never too early for liquid courage," Walter replied, his eyes twinkling. "Besides, you're about to flood your front yard on purpose. If that doesn't call for a drink, I don't know what does." The garden hose was already connected to the water spigot, stretched across the lawn like a green serpent. Richard had calculated exactly how long it would take to fill the moat to its optimal depth of 20 inches, approximately 4 hours with his water pressure, factoring in a 10% loss rate for absorption and evaporation. "You planning to add fish?" Walter asked, watching as Richard checked the hose connection one last time. "Maybe in the spring," Richard replied, though he hadn't actually considered it before. "Koi might be nice. Might want to invest in a good cover then. Neighborhood cats will turn it into a sushi bar." Walter took a sip of his bourbon-laced coffee. Speaking of predators, the Hargroves minivan drove by twice already this morning. Slow, like they were casing the place. Richard nodded, unsurprised. "I expected as much. She'll be making her usual shortcut run this afternoon. Sundays at 4:30, according to your observations. Piano lessons for their youngest. Got all timed out, do you?" Walter chuckled. "You're more devious than you look, Donovan." At precisely 10 o'clock a.m., Richard turned on the water. There was something oddly satisfying about watching the moat begin to fill, the clear water gradually rising against the concrete sides. Devin arrived around noon, bringing submarine sandwiches and a small crowd of friends who wanted to witness what was quickly becoming known around town as the Great Moat Experiment. By 3 o'clock p.m., the moat was 3/4 full, a perfect ribbon of water encircling Richard's property. The pumps hummed quietly, creating a gentle circulation that prevented stagnation. Richard and Devin installed the bridge across the section nearest the front walk, a literal crossing point that underlined the metaphorical line Richard had drawn. "It's beautiful, Mr. D," Devin said, standing back to admire their work. "Seriously, this could be in a landscaping magazine." Richard felt a surge of pride. It was beautiful, more beautiful than he had imagined. The afternoon sun caught the ripples in the water, casting dancing reflections across the surface. The native grasses he had planted along the inner edge swayed gently in the breeze. Even Walter, who had maintained a posture of amused skepticism throughout the project, seemed impressed. "Not bad for a math teacher," the old man conceded, "though I still think you're crazy." As 4:30 approached, a tension began to build. Devin's friends, sensing the coming confrontation, found excuses to linger. Walter brought out a lawn chair and set it up for optimal viewing. Even Mrs. Finkelstein and Mr. Garcia appeared, ostensibly to admire the water feature but clearly awaiting the same thing everyone else was: Melissa Hargrove's Sunday drive. At 4:28, Richard's phone buzzed with a text from Councilman Hargrove. "Final chance to be reasonable. My wife has a tight schedule today." Richard didn't bother replying. Instead, he stood by his front door, arms crossed, waiting. At precisely 4:32, the navy blue minivan appeared at the corner. It slowed as it approached the stop sign, and Richard could see Melissa Hargrove's face through the windshield, her expression changing from distracted hurry to confused surprise as she registered the transformation of his yard. The van came to a complete stop. Through the open driver's side window, Richard could hear the strains of a children's song playing on the car stereo and a young voice asking, "Why are we stopping, Mommy?" For a long moment, Melissa stared at the moat, her mouth slightly open. Then her eyes narrowed and she glanced at her watch. With a determined set to her jaw, she turned the wheel sharply and accelerated, not across Richard's lawn, but down the street in the direction she should have been going all along. A cheer went up from the small crowd. Devin clapped Richard on the back and Walter raised his thermos in salute. For his part, Richard felt an unexpected mixture of triumph and anticlimax. Was that it? Had he won so easily? 3 weeks after the Great Moat Showdown, Richard Donovan sat at his kitchen table grading algebra exams and watching the rain tap against his windows. The forecast called for heavy precipitation throughout the weekend. Good for the newly planted grass seed around his water feature, but bad for the calculus test he needed to prepare for Monday. His moat had become something of a local landmark. Joggers altered their routes to pass by the corner lot, cars slowed as they drove past, and Richard had fielded no fewer than 6 inquiries from homeowners interested in water security systems of their own. Devin had even suggested they start a landscape consulting business together over the summer. The meeting with Councilman Hargrove had gone surprisingly well. Faced with Richard's meticulous documentation and permits, not to mention the growing public support for the Moat guy on local social media, Hargrove had reluctantly acknowledged that no codes had been violated. They had parted with cool professionalism and an unspoken agreement to maintain their distance. As for Melissa Hargrove, she had not driven across Richard's lawn again, nor had she returned to her shortcut route. Walter, ever vigilant, reported that she now took Oakwood Avenue instead, adding a full 3 minutes to her commute but avoiding Richard's corner entirely. It should have felt like victory, so why, Richard wondered as he marked another incorrect equation with his red pen, did he feel so unsettled? The doorbell rang, startling him from his thoughts. Through the rain-streaked front window, he could make out a figure standing on his porch. Female, petite, holding something bulky. Richard approached the door warily. It was Melissa Hargrove, soaking wet despite the umbrella clutched in one hand. In her other arm, she held what appeared to be a plastic container covered with a towel. "Mr. Donovan," she said, her voice tight but controlled. "May I come in? It's pouring out here." Too surprised to refuse, Richard stepped back to allow her entry. Water dripped from her raincoat onto his entryway floor as she stood awkwardly, clutching her mysterious container. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said quickly, as if sensing his suspicion. I need to explain something to you." Richard gestured toward the kitchen. "Would you like some coffee? You look like you could use something warm." 15 minutes later, they sat across from each other at his kitchen table, steaming mugs between them. The plastic container, now revealed to contain a homemade apple pie, sat on the counter. "My youngest son made it," Melissa explained, noticing Richard's glance toward the pie. He insisted. "He's fascinated by your moat, calls you the castle man." Richard couldn't help but smile slightly. "Walter mentioned you have children. 3, was it?" 4, she corrected, ages 12, 9, 7, and 4. The 7-year-old Ethan is the pie baker. He has autism and baking is one of his preferred activities. She took a sip of coffee. "That's actually why I wanted to talk to you." Richard waited, watching her face carefully. Up close, she looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, hair hastily pulled back, the kind of bone-deep weariness he recognized from parents during conference nights. "Ethan's therapy sessions are on Thursdays and Sundays at the Briarwood Center," she continued. "If we're even 2 minutes late, they count it as a missed appointment and insurance won't cover it. After 3 missed appointments, they drop you from the program. There's a 2-year waiting list to get back in." Understanding began to dawn on Richard, "And your shortcut across my lawn saved you time." She nodded, staring into her coffee. 3 minutes and 40 seconds to be exact. I timed it. Taking the proper streets meant hitting the light at Maple and Jefferson, which is almost always red. That intersection alone can cost 5 minutes during peak hours. Why didn't you just leave earlier? Richard asked, the logical question that had bothered him for weeks. Melissa laughed, a short, humorless sound. Because getting Ethan into the car is a 45-minute process on a good day. Because my oldest has soccer at the same time on the other side of town, which my husband handles when he's not traveling for work, which is rare. Because my 9-year-old has asthma attacks that can't be predicted and my 4-year-old still isn't fully potty trained. She drew a deep breath. Because those 3 minutes and 40 seconds were the difference between making it work and watching it all fall apart. Richard sat back, absorbing her words. The neat mathematical equation he had constructed, lawn vandal versus property defender, suddenly contained variables he hadn't accounted for.